Good morning, everybody. You can hear me okay? Great. So as mentioned, my name is Rudisell. I'm the Emergency Management Director for Weld County. And so great conference. Hands out to Kirby and the group that has put this on. So, and you may be wondering, what's emergency management have to do with oil and gas and this process? Well, from an emergency management standpoint, one of the things that we always look at is the all hazards standpoint of what are those hazards that affect us as a community. So one of the things that we look at is what are different weather types of events that we have to plan for and those types of things. And again, you may think of, well, weather, what's that have to do with oil and gas? So early on, within our emergency management program, we were looking at the development of oil and gas in Weld County and saying, we need to have some better planning processes and better steps involved with that. So one of the things that we started looking at is what are some of the high risk areas that we have across our county, and we look at the different types of developments, the different types of oil and gas facilities that we have, and what are some of the risks that they bring to the table. And so we started obviously working with the Front Range Emergency Resource Co-op, working with our operators, meeting with them, doing the face-to-face. I really appreciate that comment from Aurora, is having those meetings face-to-face with operators, who's working in your jurisdiction, and how do we communicate with them and what's going on with the planning process. So this goes back to about 2014 when we actually started up the Front Range Emergency Co-op and really started working that and looking at the planning process and what are some of the risks. So as it always happens, I leave town and go to a conference, and as I'm flying back, coming into Denver in April, nasty winter storm come through. The flight coming back in is terrible. By the time I land, my phone is going, it's dinging like crazy, going off the hook. And one of the incidents that we'd had was a weather-related storm come through and a lightning strike to a injection well location. So this picture was on the front of our Greeley Tribune. And so if you can't see that, there's a tank flying across, and it comes back to is, all the planning that we can do for the safety of making sure we're doing safe operations and stuff didn't stop the lightning strike. So what do we need to do with this? So the issue that came out of this was fire department shows up. Obviously, there's fire going on. My phone's going off saying, hey, where's the foam at? We need to get foam on this. I'm having conversations with the fire department, and one of my first questions is, hey guys, have you talked to the operators? Have you talked to the folks that are on scene that own and run that facility? And so everybody gets on scene. We set up incident command. The challenge we had is it's out in an area that doesn't have a water system or water available. So now we're trucking in water. We're locating where's the foam at. We need more foam. Basically, it came back to let's back off. Let's let it do its thing. Let's let it burn. The operators are from that standpoint. Let's everybody be safe, and let's not try to put water on the red stuff. So I think what this did, this provided a learning moment for us, and this is really what kind of drove those questions of what does our planning process look like and where are our resources? And that's really where the Front Range Emergency Resource Co-op really started driving that. Where do we get foam? It's not just the fire districts that have foam, have that availability, nor do they have enough to handle a situation like this, but we need to rely back on the operators to help us with that as well. So that's really been one of the driving forces. So going back to looking at some of the planning steps that we took, and Josh had mentioned the tactical response plan, one of the things that we took on at Weld County is doing a local permitting process. And that was driven by our planning department with our planning folks and our county commissioners of really looking at what are we doing locally, what's our local permitting process. Luckily, I was able to step in with that working group and be able to include the requirement to have a emergency action plan for each new drilling facility that's coming into our county. And so and just one question just for the group. Does everybody know what local emergency planning committee is? Anybody heard of that before? Okay, a few. So what I did is, so those that aren't aware or don't know, the local emergency planning committee specifically does planning for chemical facilities. So if you have a business within your county that holds, stores, processes, or uses chemicals at a certain quantity, then they're required to report to the local jurisdiction or the local LEPC, and they're required to have an emergency plan. So we just took those concepts going back to that, because a lot of the oil companies report to us because of the storage of crude that they have. So we took that process of that requirement for the emergency plan and pulled that in on our local permit process, that they're required to have that plan in place as they go through, in order for them to get that permit issued. So what that helped us do is communicate back to the fire districts, give them an opportunity to look at what's going on in their district, and then also have that relationship and that ongoing conversation of what's happening, what size is the facility, what's happening with it. Is it a large footprint? Is it a small footprint? Some of the lessons learned on that is that it's not just, fill out these 3 pages and we're done. It continues to grow and continues to move forward. So one of the things we looked at with that is the process that we did with that is the plan has to be approved by emergency management, but we give the opportunity for other jurisdictions, i.e. the fire districts, to have input on that, but also make sure we have that communication. We know who the operators are, we have their contact numbers, we get together. Again, the face-to-face meetings, sitting down with the operators as they're coming in. If it's a new operator coming into our county, we sit down and explain the process of what we're looking at and what we're looking for. And that's one of the main benefits of that is we've had more participation in our LEPC meetings, having interaction with other facilities, and the oil and gas operators in our county be able to communicate out to the other folks of that group of some of the things that they're doing with their processes. So again, the tactical response plan. We had tactical response plans, an EAP or emergency action plan, site-specific emergency plans. When we first started this, it was kind of like all over the board, because some folks call it an emergency plan, some call it a different plan. We had a lot of confusion of like, well, we have our field-wide emergency plan, so why doesn't that cover it? So the challenge we ran into is, in the conversation I was getting from fire districts, and mostly the fire chiefs, they'd be gone on vacation for a week and a half. They come back to the district, and now there's 2 more drilling rigs in their district. And they had the question that they had was, how do I know that those facilities are going in? And really what it came back to is they didn't understand what the county planning process was, because they had that ability to have input. And a lot of times they were getting notification from our planning department about either the drilling operation going in or something going on. So it was really kind of pushed back to, like, if you get those emails or you are receiving information from our planning department, you need to read those emails and have input in that. So really the working relation with the operators and the fire districts, and the education to our fire districts about what the planning process is was just as important as meeting with our operators. And so attending our fire chiefs meetings and providing that information to them and making sure that they understood what that was. So again, going back to our county code, the aspect of that was making sure that we had an approved emergency plan. So for my office, we get the plans from the operators. We review those, make sure the fire districts are correct, make sure the contacts are correct in that. We understand what equipment's going on site at that facility, and then we share that with the fire district, and making sure that they understand, they review that. If they have questions or they want to meet with the operator based on the facility, then we coordinate and help have those meetings. And a good example that I'll share, we had one of our rural fire districts. We submitted the EAP to them to review and look at, and one of the things, the truck route or the haul route that they had went right past their fire district, which is the bus stop for the local community. And the concern is we're going to have a lot of truck traffic now going past that location, with the kids getting off, or picking up during school for the school bus, and then drop-off times. And so we worked with the operator and the county public works department to make sure, help them to understand that we want to change what that haul route is. So that's one success, I think, from a safety standpoint, that we were very successful in doing that. We were able to change the haul route and get that approved. And so that was a success for a safety factor for the kids. So I thought that was really good. So as we continue to go on, one of the pieces within our emergency plan is that concept of we want to make sure that we understand from the emergency management standpoint and from our first responders that we understand what process they're in while they're going through their drilling phase. So one of the paragraphs that we have in our emergency plan is we want to understand, emergency management wants notified when you start drilling, when you go to completions, and then when it goes to production, because that helps us give an idea of, okay, what's happening out at each of those facilities. And again, from a learning moment is I'm thinking, okay, if you're going to move a drilling rig out there, just tell me when you're going to start drilling and it's all good, right? Unbeknownst to me is, it's a time frame, it's not an exact science, it's having those conversations, what does that look like? So again, meeting with several operators going like, well, what is it that you really want to know? I was like, well, one of the challenges that we had from an incident that we had in 2017 is first responders went out to the site and they didn't really understand what was taking place at that site. They knew it was a drilling site, but the after action review came back as, well, we hadn't been out there enough, or we didn't know enough about the operation to understand what they were doing on site. So we amended our emergency plan to have that paragraph in there about, look, we want to know when you guys start drilling, we want to know when you guys start completion operations, and then when it goes into production. So then we have this incident, and I believe this was last spring. The site is under construction, so they haven't even started drilling yet, but we have an incident, injury, gets hurt, it winds up being a big call. So again, one of the things that we look at is like, okay, let's improve, let's continue to review what we're doing. Is it a best practice? So now we're looking at, okay, help us to understand when you guys get out there and start construction at the site. So again, it's ever flowing, and it's a best practice that we're looking at. So again, Josh talked a little bit about this. This is what we refer to as a tactical response card. This is a thing that kind of drives that our first responders really want to look at. One of the things that I'll mention on this is with help from our operators in Weld County, we've hosted Wild Well to come out and do some training for us. And one of the things that we really looked at is, what are those risks and what's the threat based on a facility? And one of the things that they came up with on their side of it, from the hazmat standpoint, if the location is on fire, is that those areas of a hot, warm, and cold zone, and it starts at 250 feet, 500 feet, and then goes out to 1,000 feet. And so one of the things that we looked at is really let's make sure that we're putting that on the tactical response card, and that's easy, that's understandable. If you talk to a fire guy and say, hey, the hot zone's 250 feet, we need to be back out of that, or it's 500 feet is a warm zone, and then we can set up instant command outside 500 feet or within 1,000 feet, and we're okay. They understand that terminology, and it's really easy to throw that on a map. Again, lessons learned that we've done at 2 o'clock in the morning when they're running to a call. They have red lights in their cabs, so they don't, night vision type stuff. Red lettering does not show up, or red circles don't show up very well on the maps. So again, lessons learned, and so we continue to improve on that. And again, contact information, understanding what those emergency calls are, how do we communicate, and who are the people that we want to make sure that we talk to. Again, one of the things that we run into is we can do all the planning that we can to keep people safe, make sure we're doing safe operations and stuff, and then Mother Nature has fun with us. Lightning strike. The one thing that's interesting about this incident is, again, as we continue to move forward from where we were probably 2012, 2013 to where we're at now, is that understanding that each of these events are handled as a hazmat incident, and the fire department responds out and they wait for the operators to show up. We develop that unified command with operators and fire and emergency response personnel, and make sure we're doing appropriate actions on that, and making sure that our first responders aren't going in and just putting water on it or shutting and turning valves off unless they're directed to do so by an operator. So again, lots of good lessons learned on that. So again, what's in the plan? One of the things that we look at is is the communication of what, just a description of where the location is. Are there residents close by? Are there schools close by? Are there waterways close by? What's the description of the equipment? Is it 8 wells? Is it 16 wells? Is it 32 wells? One of the terms that was used earlier is are there any tanks on site? So is there storage on site? Is everything going directly into pipeline? If it's going into pipeline, that reduces our risk substantially because the threat of fire at that location is dropped quite a bit. So again, understanding what's going on in that. One of the things that is really helpful from the emergency management standpoint is with these written plans, it helps us meet the requirements under EPA for our local emergency planning committee. So that's part of the reason why we have those written documents. Some of the questions that have come up from the operator side about those written documents are, okay, well, once we go into production, then if something happens at that facility and somebody requests that emergency plan, but it's 5 years old, then what? Because somebody says, well, that hasn't been updated for 5 years. Again, one of the statements that we have in the emergency action plan, again, this is site specific for drilling until completion. Once that facility is into production, then it's covered under the field-wide emergency plan, which are typically updated routinely, or I hope they're updated routinely. So again, understanding what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish is really, it's looking at, here's an operation that's taking place right now within these few months. We want to know what's going on. We want to know what's taking place there. And then the long-term planning piece of that is understanding what the footprint is going to look like. Right now, we may be doing 8 wells. You know what? Next year, we want to come back and do 8 more. So we plan out for 16 wells. What's that storage look like? How do we get to it? One of the things that we were able to work through with our planning department and our fire districts is actually addressing each of our new well sites. So that it sounded real easy when we started. How hard is it to get an address off a county road? I want to say it's probably at least a year process before we got it done. But the concept is that helps our first responders. Granted, we can give our first responders a GPS point. We can, that can come into dispatch, and they can say, hey, you know what? You go to the intersection of X and Y, and here's how you get into that. That's great if we're talking to an operator, but 90% of the time it's somebody driving past a road or something like that, or somebody that's not familiar with the area that calls 911. The call goes in. The guys get to the intersection and they find out that the access road's actually another mile away. So that was part of the reason why we pushed to get the addressing done for each of our new wells. It doesn't solve all the issues. We have a lot of large ranches and large areas that don't have or have one access to several wells. So we understand that, but that was an accomplishment for our first responders that they thought was really, really good, and it helps them respond to those calls. So again, supporting documents, looking at maps, looking at the application documents that comes into our planning department. The one thing I will say is, if you want to know how we did that code change or that planning process, you can talk with our planning department. Tom Parco, raise your hand, sir, is our planning director, and then Jason over here is our WOGLA guy, is what we call it, Weld County Oil and Gas Assessment. You have to have an acronym, right? WOGLA. So you can chat with those folks while you're here. My time is running out. So some of the planning considerations. Let me get to the lessons learned. Here's the real information out of all of this. Again, it's an ongoing process. It's a once we write those plans, just because we write that plan, it doesn't mean that it's solid in place. Even to the point of as things are going on, things change. We have those emergency action plans. There's been times where we've had operations going on. There's an incident out at the site, and we get the fire districts out there and going, okay, we need to go out and we actually need to meet with these guys because of that incident. Those types of things. Again, the work that we're doing with the Front Range Emergency Response Resource Group. Understanding what are the resources that we have, what are the resources that we need, and how do we handle some of the larger incidents. So again, it's an ongoing process. I think one of the things that we've really been able to develop is that really good working relationship with the operators and with our fire districts. And again, moving that process forward it just continues. I think the face-to-face time is very important. Doing the tabletop exercises, doing the drills, doing the site visits. Again, I think sometimes we hear from our first responders like, well, you know what, I did that site visit, I did that 5 or 6 years ago. And I'm like, have you been out to a new site? Because they change routinely. There's always updates, and make sure you go to a different operator because they may be doing something different and something that you can learn. So I think I'm out of time, so that's, I think we'll go to questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Roy.